Okay, in our last game, we talked about double pawns, right? And I told you it was the first of two videos because there are different ways that we can try to work on capitalize on this weakness. And you should know double pawns sometimes are a weakness, especially as we get towards the end game. But sometimes when they are like this in the center, they could be beneficial, especially to defend. Notice how these pawns are controlling so much of the center. So that's one of the benefits. Also, they give us semi-open files and so on. Now, in the other video, we learned how we could capitalize if we manage to get a pawn majority. In this game, you're going to see another approach. Sometimes all we're looking for is to find a way to make those double pawns weak. And we already talked about on the very first video of this course, we talked about isolated pawns. So that tells me if I were able to trade this pawn, force him to trade it or to advance it, that's going to make these pawns weaker. For example, imagine for a second that I do e5 and the bishop cannot take, right? So let's say I do e5 and they take. Those pawns automatically become double pawns, but they're also isolated. Also, if this pawn ever pushes, let's say it advances, it's safe, they do it, well, then c5 is going to be a weak square for my pieces to get there. It could be even a knight. So that's the approach that we're looking for, trying to leave the pawns by themselves so that we can capitalize on them. So instead of working on the other side of the board, we're going for them to collect them. They are weak pawns. So in this game, the question that I have for you is, if you were the white pieces, what would you do next? This time you don't have to tell me the whole plan or think of a plan. Just let me know in the comments if you can come up with the next move for the white pieces. Well, if you post a video and you came up with c5, congrats, that's a very powerful move. And I know that for many people, it could be hard to come up with it because you're giving the pawn for free. But if you really think about it, after d takes e5, you're going to see that even if you don't know much chess, if you don't know much about pawn structure, this is really ugly, guys, just by the look of it. So you got three triple pawns isolated plus another isolated pawn on a6. So this is what we're looking for. Now, of course, the black pieces did not take on c5. They went knight c8. But now you're going to see how we're going to continue to capitalize on the weak pawn structure through the entire game. So we got bishop e3, just developing our pieces, castle, queen d2, queen e7, rook d1. These are just very natural moves. It's like the position is asking for them. So bishop e8, f4, we need to start putting pressure and attacking. This is already enough for them to be concerned with. Now let's see if we can put pressure on the king side as well. So we got f5, pawn takes, and then after pawn takes, this is really ugly. We have also, I'm pretty sure you're familiar with this concept of the pawn islands, right? So we don't want to have so many pawn groups because then it's harder to defend them. Now you can see that we have isolated, 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 doubled pawns. So if I'm playing this, all I'm thinking of, I wish I could eliminate all of the pieces. Just leave the king and the pawns, and this is going to be very easy to win. So after g takes a5, and by the way, I know that some of you might be asking, why didn't the black pieces just take with the rook? It seems it makes more sense. Well, I think they were just a little bit concerned about moves like bishop c2 with a tempo followed by f5, and definitely the white pieces get a very strong attack. So g takes f5, and then rook e1, just putting the rook on the same file as the queen. Now here I have to tell you, there are two kinds of players. Some players are going to say, you know what, forget about the pawn structure, I'm going for that king. There's a semi-open file here, maybe something like rook f3, rook g3, and I really like that plan. There are other players who are more strategic and they say, you know what, I'm going to just focus on the pawn structure. So in this game, that's what the white pieces did, just rook e1. Then they took on c5 finally, and this is just happy to see this. These are just pawns are going to fall sooner or later. I'm not even interested on getting them right away. They could stay there for as long as they like. They're going to be captured. So we have, after d takes e5, we got queen f2 ready to collect, knight d6, bishop c5, hitting the queen as well, queen d8, bishop d4, trying to remove that bishop. Don't forget, that bishop is right now one of the most important pieces for black. It is not only acting as a bishop, but it's also defending the king. I myself, I play many of these structures with the fianchetto, and this bishop sometimes serves as a pawn to defend the king. So bishop d4, take, queen takes, queen f6, and look, again, horrible pawn structure. I'm thinking of the endgame. Any trade of pieces is going to be good for me, especially the queen. Queen's off the board. This means we are getting really close to the end game. So bishop b3 check, now trade queens, and then rook to the 7th rank. Now, I know that all of you agree these moves that you just saw are very simple. They're just natural moves. So rook e7, the rook has to defend. Now, we double up on the e file. Any of us will be able to come up with these moves. Then we got bishop g6, very ugly bishop. And after rook e6, again, just trying to simplify the game. This rook is better than the other one, so let's trade it. I'm happy with that. And after bishop e6, of course, I'm forcing the rook to leave. I continue to put pressure on the isolated pawn. So rook e8. Now, of course, I cannot collect on c7 because my bishop falls, but I'm okay with simplifying the game. That's it. So bishop takes. Now, this is an endgame. All of us should be thinking of activating the king. But in this game, you're going to see that the white pieces first went for that square. I told you at the beginning in that initial position that if we made the d pawn advance or get traded, c5 was going to be weak. Many times we capitalized on it earlier in the middle game, but even in the end game, we could use that square for our pieces. So knight c5, the bishop can never kick us out. It's a dark square, and we're attacking that pawn. So a5, and now, like I said before, it's time to activate the king. Bishop f7, again, should we take or not? Well, I'm happy to get to that endgame, king and pawns endgame. So b3, and by the way, just imagine the knight's gone. I could see my king going to c5, the same weak square to collect. I could even find a way to get to the a pawn. So h5, another isolated pawn. We talked about those. g3, king e3, knight b5, knight b7. Immediately, we just go after those pawns. For the black pieces, not so easy to attack our pawns because they are healthy, they are connected. These are good pawns. So knight b7, attacking the pawn. Now c5, they're offering you the c pawn and the a pawn. Which one should you go for? Well, I want to leave them with the double pawns. Plus, when I take this one, this is automatically a passed pawn. So we got king d6, check, king d5. And guys, up to this point, this is exactly like more than I wanted to show you, right? So you saw how they identified the double pawns, they detached the d pawn to leave them isolated. And you see how it's going to be a weakness, a liability for the remaining of the game. However, let me show you how the game ended. It's quick. So they offered a trade. What do you think? Should we trade or not? Of course, we trade. Notice that we're helping them fix the pawn structure, but this is a one endgame. Now, if you calculate and you don't see it clear how to win this endgame, you might as well avoid that. I'm pretty sure you're going to win this no matter what. But they took, and then after a3, they went on to win the game. Now, you might be asking, why a3 and not a4? Well, just like I told you in the other game, if we get ahead of ourselves, we might make a silly mistake that throws away everything that we have worked for. At this point, my opponent also has a pass pawn, and we're trying to win this based on the principle of the outside pass pawn. So a3 is to do b4. So after a3, the black pieces resigned, but if they had done king c6, then you could do something like pawn b4. And let's say, just for a second, let's say they take. If they don't take, I'm going to take. No big deal. But the point is that they have a pass pawn, I have a pass pawn, but my pawn is the outside pass pawn. How is that important? In case you guys don't know that yet, you should. You're going to see that by the time they take, and I take this pawn, my king is going to be closer to the other pawns. So I should be able to win this. So even if they go here, just to show you quickly, guys, I'm ready to get this pawn. And at this point, I could do king f6 or even h4. They have no more pawn moves. They have to move the king. This should be extremely easy. So like always, before we go, I'm going to show you this initial position just for you to visualize everything that we did. Don't forget, the move here was pawn to c5, trying to detach a pawn. And then we just tried to put pressure on those weak pawns and collect them. So with that said, thanks for watching. I will see you in our next video.